reading in the school. She was in charge of the forest school. And do you have that in the US? No,
not exactly the same name.
But it's basically where you take children out into the environment outside, and you just take learning outside for parts of the day. And what she wanted to do was to invite children to create their own reading spaces, their own social reading environments, but in the forest, in the woods. Mm. And initially she was thinking, are the children going to read, or are they just going to spend the whole time building the spaces and moving between them in a really excited way? And actually, what happened was is just that. In the first 2 sessions, there was lots of movement and there was lots of excitement. It was a very kind of busy session, lots of moving around. But she resisted intervening. She held back. She watched. She trusted in the children to kind of take their learning in the way they, their reading in the way they wanted to. And as the club, I think they call it the Reading Adventurers, which is a lovely name. As they developed this club over time, it settled and slowed. And some children were reading on their own inside these like dark dens. Others were grouping together, and it became very clear that it was as much about who the children were reading with as the spaces. And what was really important here is that the children were given ownership over these spaces, that they had designed them themselves. They weren't given this space, they made it themselves, they made it their own, and it linked in with their own preferred styles and ways of reading, which I think was really, really powerful. And although this happens, it's really creative having it out in a forest. You can still do the same thing in a classroom, can't you? With inviting the children to lay it out in the way they want to put reading recommendations up on the wall, to put books on display that they think other children should be reading. So, I mean, I know as a teacher, you were saying, you may have done similar things when you were in the classroom.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This is.
Yeah, that's what I think is really powerful about that is that these spaces are, we all want to read in different ways, and it's giving children the opportunity to choose that. But of course, it's not just about the reading communities in the classroom, child-to-child reading community. It's broader than that. It includes the teacher, but it also includes the broader school community, involving parents and carers and other community members who might come in and read in the classroom with children. So there's lots of ways of fostering those kind of connections. And I know Class Tag, you do just that, developing this relationship between home and school through your product. But also schools can create these kind of live social events that might include food and music and storytelling and bringing parents in for these quite exciting events. Other schools have set up working groups, particularly asking particular parents to come and actually shape the direction of the school. Because social reading environments, these communities of readers, as the OU and the UKLA call them, these communities of readers, they don't happen overnight. They need to be built over time, and it needs to sort of sustain commitment and sustain sort of reflection on the part of kind of staff teams, really. So that's sort of social reading environments. And the second thing that the OU pulled out, which I said, was this informal book talk. And book talk is so important that that teachers are, we are readers who teach, and teachers who read. And I think it goes this two-way, that we bring our own reading identities into the classroom and we let the children see that. Mm-hmm. That's so important. During the class, that we read as much as possible. We talk about reading, what we like, what we don't like. And I don't know if I said before, but I actually train teachers, as well as being a researcher. I train teachers at the University of Roehampton. And one of the things we share with them is research by Aidan Chambers, which is just called Tell Me. He wrote a book called Tell Me. And it's about opening up talk about books, not just because it links to some writing we're going to do later, but because it opens up discussions about ourselves and the world. And he has these 4 really interesting prompts for talk, which I think lots of teachers find useful, which is: tell me what you liked, tell me what you didn't like, because that's just as important as what you like. We all have things we don't like. Tell me what puzzled you, what questions did it kind of bring up in your mind? And also, what connections did you make? What connections did you make with your with your lives. And I think, once you open up those discussions, children can really surprise you. I know when I was a teacher sharing books, they would make connections that I had not thought of. And it helped me think about books in a completely different way. So this book talk is really powerful. And it links as well with recommendations, that teacher understanding and teachers' knowledge of books is so important. Sometimes in the early stages of research, of the teachers as readers research, teachers were drawing on texts that they'd read as a child. That's natural. We know these books. We know we love them. But it's even more powerful if we can develop our knowledge of books over time with all the new books that are coming out that represent all different lives, different experiences, different lived experiences, so that we can pick a book for that child, at the right moment. And that requires knowledge, right, of books. And as busy teachers, I think, it's important we keep reading and that we keep talking with each other about books. I know that your community, you're sharing and talking about books and talking with other teachers about what they've read and what they like. So that's really important, because we want children to, get engrossed in series books. Children can develop these preferences, but through book talk and recommendations, we broaden their repertoire and we broaden their, what they're experiencing. So that's so important. So there's two last things I think I'll try and get raised, and I'll do them very quickly. The third one is about independent reading. So it kind of links with social reading, and it links with, reading aloud, reading, making recommendations. So independent reading, I think when we reflect on ourselves as teachers, we need to think, well, when we read independently, where are we doing this? Is it really independent? Meaning on our own, or are we actually in a group? I'll give an example. When I was a teacher, I ran a comic club, and these were children who wouldn't necessarily choose to pick up a novel, but we ran this comic club, and we had lots of new magazines, and it was really, really popular. Kids were coming at lunchtime, and they were engaged in independent reading, but they weren't on their own. They were gathered, sprawled on the floor, magazines everywhere, kind of reading together. Alone but together. And I think, independent reading is unique. It's unique to different people. It's not just sitting at a desk silently, and some children just sort of pretend like turning the pages because we have to sit in silence. That isn't authentic, reading independently. What we want is being invested in your reading. So that's independent reading. And then reading aloud is the last of the four. So reading aloud is where teachers are reading text for the joy of it, not because we're going to do some writing based on it afterwards. None of those things. They're reading because it's a class book that we're going to share together, just for pleasure. And it does two things. That creates a kind of a common reading experience. So everyone in that class knows about that story, can talk about that story. Some schools even do it as a whole school book. Everyone's reading the same book, and that can be really powerful. You've got, a child in reception talking about the same book as a year in 6, and it creates that buzz, But the thing about reading aloud is it doesn't just have to be owned by the teacher. And actually the same teacher, Claire Williams is her name, she works in London. She also did this kind of sign up for reading aloud, where she asked the question, who owns reading aloud? She knew it was important for her to model it, model characterization and the expression of reading, and to open up these books that children couldn't necessarily read themselves. But she also noticed that children also became desperate to read their own favourite books aloud to the class. And so that's really important, that reading aloud can be teacher, can be children, can be parents and carers, can be, any member of the community, that could enrich that culture in the class. So those are the four elements there, really, with some examples.
Thank you so much. Four very important things to keep in mind for schools, fostering that sense of reading for pleasure. The next question I'm really keen on is, can you tell us a little bit more about your organization specifically and how Teacher Monster is supporting teachers with this important role and fostering a love of reading?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think,
We're good, Sam.